My name is Knox Reynolds, 67 years old, and recently widowed after 42 wonderful years with my Eleanor. When I moved in with my daughter Amanda and her husband Richard, I never expected to overhear those devastating words that would change everything. Standing frozen in that dark hallway, listening to my son-in-law demand they throw me out like garbage, I felt my world crumble for the second time in less than a year. What happened next would shock us all. Before I continue my story, let me know where you're watching from in the comments below. Hit that subscribe button if you've ever experienced family betrayal or just want to hear how justice can sometimes arrive in unexpected ways. I spent 40 years in construction, working my way up from carrying lumber to becoming a project manager. These hands helped build the Thompson Memorial Bridge, the Westview Hospital, and dozens of schools and libraries across 3 counties. I took pride in my work, in creating structures that would outlast me, serving communities long after I was gone. Eleanor always said I built our city one beam at a time. Eleanor and I met in high school, married young, and built a simple but good life together. We raised our daughter Amanda in a modest 3-bedroom house. I mostly renovated myself on weekends. Money was tight sometimes, but we managed. We had plans for retirement, small ones, a trip to the Grand Canyon, maybe visiting the Florida coast in winter. Nothing fancy, just time together after decades of hard work. Cancer changed everything. Eleanor first complained about back pain, then fatigue. By the time they found it, the pancreatic cancer had already spread. We fought hard for 18 months. I took early retirement to care for her, burning through our savings on treatments insurance wouldn't cover, alternative therapies when conventional medicine failed, anything that offered hope. In the end, I held her hand as she slipped away 8 months ago, whispering that she loved us. Afterward, I rattled around our house alone, her absence deafening. Meals lost their taste. Sleep became elusive. Our home, once warm with memories, felt like a museum of loss. The medical bills kept coming long after the funeral flowers wilted. I sold her car, my fishing boat, even my collection of vintage tools, but the debt barely shrank. It was during one of her weekly visits that Amanda suggested I move in with them. "Dad, that spare bedroom is just sitting empty," she said, setting down a grocery bag of prepared meals she brought every Sunday. "It makes no sense for you to stay here alone, rattling around this big house with all these memories." I resisted at first. "I don't want to be a burden, sweetie." "You raised me alone after Mom left when I was 4, Amanda reminded me, referring to her biological mother who abandoned us for another man. Eleanor had been her real mom in every way that mattered since Amanda was 6. "Let me help you now." "What about Richard?" I asked, knowing my son-in-law had always been cordial but never particularly warm toward me. "He's completely on board," she assured me, with such conviction I believed her. "It would be temporary, just until we figure out your next steps." After another month of struggling with bills and loneliness, I agreed. I sold the house, paid off the remaining medical debts, and moved in with just 2 suitcases and a box of photo albums. The small amount left would supplement my modest pension and Social Security. At least I wouldn't be completely dependent on their charity. Tommy and Lisa, my grandchildren aged 10 and 8, were thrilled to have me there. Amanda welcomed me with genuine warmth. Richard shook my hand firmly, smiled, and said all the right things, but something in his eyes never quite matched his words. "Great to have you, Knox," he said. "Stay as long as you need." I tried to make myself useful from the beginning. I fixed the leaky faucet in the guest bathroom, replaced the weather stripping on the doors before winter set in, and took over mowing the lawn. When Amanda mentioned their landscaper charged $80 per visit, I insisted on taking over. "Gives me something to do," I told her. "Been cutting grass since I was 12 years old." I watched the kids after school until Amanda or Richard got home from work. Tommy and I built a model rocket together. Lisa and I planted a small vegetable garden in the backyard. I taught them both how to play gin rummy, just like Eleanor had taught Amanda. Every month, I offered part of my Social Security check for household expenses. "Dad, that's not necessary," Amanda protested the first time. "I insist," I said, placing $300 on the kitchen counter. "I'm not living here for free." Amanda accepted reluctantly, but I noticed Richard pocketed the money immediately. Sometimes I cooked dinner using Eleanor's recipes, simple meat and potatoes, dishes that the kids seemed to enjoy. Richard would compliment the food but often worked late, missing family meals altogether. Around the 3-month mark, I began noticing changes. Richard started making comments, subtle at first. "The water bill is higher than usual this month," he mentioned one evening, glancing my way. Another time he sighed loudly when finding my coffee cup in the sink. "Some people in this house need to remember to put things in the dishwasher." Amanda would jump to my defense, causing tension between them. I started washing my few dishes by hand immediately after using them and taking shorter showers. I made myself scarce when Richard was home, often retreating to my room to read or watch television on my small tablet with headphones. The grandchildren remained my joy. Tommy would burst through the door after school, eager to tell me about science class or soccer practice. Lisa would bring home art projects, proudly presenting watercolor paintings for my approval. These moments kept me going as the atmosphere in the house grew increasingly strained. "Grandpa, can you help me with my history project?" Tommy asked one afternoon. "It's about the 60s. "The 60s? I laughed. "I was just a kid then, but I remember plenty." We spent hours working on his presentation about the moon landing. I told him about watching it live on television. The whole neighborhood gathered around the Johnsons' house because they had the biggest TV on the block. "Did you want to be an astronaut?" Tommy asked, eyes wide. "Every boy did back then," I told him. "But I found my calling building things here on Earth instead." These were the good moments that made the increasingly uncomfortable ones bearable. I cherished them, knowing instinctively that my time in their home was growing limited, despite what Amanda had promised about as long as you need. The situation deteriorated more rapidly as winter set in. My arthritis always worsened in cold weather, making it harder to keep up with yard work and household repairs. One morning, I struggled to open a jar of pickles, my knuckles swollen and painful. "Need some help with that, old-timer?" Richard asked, taking the jar from my hands and opening it with an exaggerated twist. "Getting pretty weak in your old age, huh?" He laughed as if joking, but the mockery in his voice was unmistakable. Amanda frowned from across the kitchen but said nothing. These small humiliations accumulated day by day. One afternoon, Richard came home early and found me napping in the recliner with the television on. "Must be nice to lounge around all day while some of us work," he muttered, loud enough for me to hear as I woke up. I had actually spent the morning fixing their broken garbage disposal and felt exhausted afterward, but didn't bother explaining. The bathroom became another source of conflict. Richard complained about my shaving cream left on the counter, about the special soap I used for my dry skin, even about the smell of my aftershave. "It smells like an old folks' home in here," he said once, spraying air freshener excessively while Amanda was at the grocery store. Then came the financial discussions I wasn't meant to hear. "His Social Security barely covers what he eats," Richard said one night, their bedroom door not quite closed, plus the extra water, electricity, heating costs. "Dad gives us money every month," Amanda responded. $300? "That's nothing compared to what it costs to keep him," Richard countered. "And now he's talking about needing some expensive arthritis medication insurance won't fully cover." I had mentioned the medication once, debating whether it was worth the expense, but never asked them to help pay for it. After overhearing this, I decided to live with the pain instead. My memory, still sharp in most ways, occasionally faltered on small things, as happens to many people my age. I misplaced my reading glasses, or forgot whether I'd taken my blood pressure medication. Richard seized on these minor lapses, exaggerating them when speaking to Amanda. "He left the stove on yesterday," he told her, though I knew I hadn't cooked anything that day. "It's not safe having someone with dementia around the kids." "My father does not have dementia," Amanda snapped, one of the few times she directly challenged him. "Not yet, maybe," Richard replied, "but he's declining. You can see it. He needs professional care, not amateurs like us." The word care in his mouth sounded like disposal. I began researching affordable senior housing that night on my tablet, but the waiting lists were years long, and the immediate options cost far more than my limited income could support. Pride prevented me from calling my few remaining friends to ask for help. Most were facing their own retirement struggles, and I couldn't bear to admit how bad things had gotten. The grandchildren noticed the tension, though I tried to shield them from it. Lisa asked me one evening why I looked sad. "Just missing Grandma Eleanor," I told her, which wasn't a lie, just not the complete truth. "I miss her too," Lisa said, leaning against my shoulder. "She made the best cookies." "That she did," I agreed, swallowing the lump in my throat. "Maybe we could make some together sometime, using her recipe." Lisa brightened at this, but later that week, when we mentioned cookie baking to Amanda, Richard interjected. "The kitchen's going to be tied up all weekend with meal prep," he said firmly. Maybe another time. There never seemed to be another time for anything I suggested. A particularly difficult moment came during a family dinner, one of the rare occasions when Richard was home early enough to eat with everyone. Amanda had prepared lasagna, my cooking contribution limited to the garlic bread after Richard complained about me taking over the kitchen previously. "How's the job hunt going, Tommy?" Richard asked my grandson, who had been looking for weekend yard work in the neighborhood. "Mr. Jensen said I can rake his leaves next Saturday," Tommy answered proudly. "He's paying me $20. "Good man," I said. "Learning the value of hard work early." Richard snorted. "Make sure you actually earn that money. Nobody respects freeloaders who expect handouts." His eyes flicked toward me for just a second, but the message was clear. Amanda stared at her plate. The kids exchanged uncomfortable glances. "May I be excused?" Lisa asked, her food half-eaten. Later, I heard Tommy asking Amanda why Daddy was always angry around Grandpa. I didn't hear her response, but that night I cried silently in my room, missing Eleanor desperately, wishing I could talk to her about what was happening. She would have known what to do. She always did. The next morning, I called a senior center across town, asking about their housing resources, their social workers' advice. The waiting lists for affordable places remained years long, and my options were limited. I began to wonder if I should simply rent a cheap room somewhere, even if it meant living in a less safe neighborhood. Anything seemed better than the growing hostility in what was supposed to be my daughter's home. "You've got options," the social worker had said kindly. "Limited ones, but they exist. Take your time to decide what's best for you." But time, it turned out, was something I didn't have much of. It was nearly midnight when I woke with my arthritis flaring badly. The weather had turned suddenly colder, and my joints protested every movement. I needed water to take the over-the-counter pain reliever I kept by my bedside. The house was dark as I shuffled down the hallway, trying to step quietly on the creaking floorboards. A thin line of light showed beneath the kitchen door, voices murmuring inside. I hesitated, not wanting to interrupt if Amanda and Richard were having a private conversation, but the pain pushed me forward. Just as I reached for the door handle, Richard's voice rose sharply, words cutting through the quiet house with startling clarity. "Get that filthy old man out of my house. I'm done feeding him." I froze, hands suspended in midair, breath caught in my throat. "Richard, please lower your voice," Amanda pleaded. "You'll wake everyone." "I don't care anymore," Richard continued, his voice only slightly quieter but filled with venom. "I'm sick of the smell of Ben Gay and old person. Sick of him shuffling around like he owns the place. Sick of spending my hard-earned money supporting him. He contributes what he can," Amanda said weakly. $300? That's nothing," Richard spat out, echoing the complaint I'd overheard weeks earlier. "Do you know how much food he eats? How much the water bill has gone up from his endless showers? My showers lasted 5 minutes maximum these days, specifically to avoid such complaints." "He's my father," Amanda said, voice trembling. "He has nowhere else to go right now." "Not my problem," Richard replied coldly. "He worked his whole life, didn't he? What did he do with all that money? Wasted it, obviously." My heart pounded painfully in my chest. The money had gone to raising Amanda alone after her mother left, to paying for her braces, her college education, her first car. Later, to Eleanor's treatments, to giving her every chance at survival, at comfort in her final days. "The medical bills took everything," Amanda explained, saying what I couldn't. "Mom's cancer, the treatments, they tried everything." "Still not my problem," Richard insisted. "I didn't sign up to have some decrepit old man living in my house, embarrassing me in front of colleagues. Jenkins from accounting came over last weekend, and your father spent 30 minutes rambling about building some bridge 40 years ago. Jenkins was bored to tears." I remembered the conversation differently. Jenkins had seemed genuinely interested, asking several questions about construction techniques. But perhaps I'd misread the situation. "He'll be heartbroken if we ask him to leave," Amanda said, voice small and uncertain. "Either he goes, or I go," Richard stated flatly. "I'm serious, Amanda. I want him out by the end of the month. Put him in a home, on the street, wherever. I don't care anymore." A long silence followed. I stood motionless in the hallway, pain forgotten, replaced by a deep, spreading coldness. I waited for Amanda to defend me, to refuse this cruel ultimatum. I'll talk to him tomorrow," she finally whispered. "See what options he has." The betrayal cut deeper than any physical pain I'd ever experienced. My own daughter choosing her husband over her father. The daughter I'd raised alone after her mother abandoned us. The daughter whose college education I'd paid for by working 60-hour weeks and sacrificing my own dreams. The daughter who had promised Eleanor on her deathbed that she'd look after me. I backed away silently, one careful step at a time, no longer concerned about water or medication. In my room, I sat on the edge of the bed, hands shaking, vision blurred with tears I refused to let fall. The pain in my joints now seemed trivial compared to the ache in my heart. Sleep eluded me as I stared at the ceiling, memories flooding unbidden. Amanda taking her first steps, reaching for my hands with complete trust, teaching her to ride a bicycle, running alongside to ensure she wouldn't fall, working overtime to afford the prom dress she desperately wanted, the pride on her face when she graduated college, the first in our family to earn a degree, walking her down the aisle at her wedding, giving her away to Richard with hope and trust that he would care for her as I had. Had I somehow failed as a father? Had I raised a daughter who could discard me so easily? Or was Richard's influence stronger than the bonds of family I thought we shared? Around 3 in the morning, my grief began to crystallize into resolve. I would not wait to be evicted from my daughter's life. I would not subject myself to another day of Richard's contempt or Amanda's weakening defense. I would not become the burden they clearly considered me to be. As dawn approached, I made my decision. I would leave on my own terms, preserving what little dignity I had left. Where I would go remained uncertain, but anything seemed better than staying where I was so clearly unwanted. The social worker's card was in my wallet. There were temporary options, emergency shelters for seniors if needed. The first hints of daylight crept around the window blinds as I finally drifted into a brief, troubled sleep, my mind made up but my heart in pieces. I woke before sunrise, my body stiff from the restless night but my mind surprisingly clear. The house remained silent as I moved quietly around my room, pulling out my old duffel bag from the closet. I packed methodically, taking only what would fit inside, a week's worth of clothes, essential toiletries, medications, my tablet, chargers. The framed photograph of Eleanor and me on our 40th anniversary. The small wooden box containing her wedding ring and a lock of her hair I'd kept after she passed. Sitting at the small desk in the corner, I wrote 3 letters. The first to Amanda, trying to find words that expressed my disappointment without cruelty. I reminded her of all we'd been through together, of Eleanor's final wishes, of my love for her despite everything. I told her I'd heard the conversation and was removing the burden of my presence before she had to ask. I assured her I would be fine, though I had no idea if that was true. The second letter was for my grandchildren, explaining in gentler terms why I had to leave, promising I would see them again when possible, reminding them to be kind and brave in all circumstances. I included my phone number and email address, though I doubted Richard would allow them to contact me. The third letter was briefer, addressed to Richard. You got what you wanted. Take care of them properly. I placed the letters in separate envelopes, labeling each one clearly. From my wallet, I removed my bank card and laid it alongside the $300 I'd planned to contribute for the month. Added to it was another $400 from my emergency cash savings. For the grandchildren, I wrote on a sticky note attached to the money. As I finished these preparations, I realized I'd need my heavier jacket for the cool morning air. It had been hung in the coat closet near the front door. Silently, I made my way downstairs, duffel bag in hand, and opened the closet door carefully to avoid its usual squeak. Reaching for my jacket, I accidentally knocked over a stack of papers on the closet shelf. As I stooped to gather them, a bank letterhead caught my eye. Final notice. Before foreclosure. Read the bold red letters at the top. The document was dated just 1 week earlier, addressed to Richard and Amanda Bennett. Confused, I looked more closely at the scattered papers. More bank notices, credit card statements showing massive debt, gambling receipts, a letter from Richard's workplace mentioning financial discrepancies requiring explanation. Mortgage statements showed no payments made for 3 months. My first instinct was to replace everything as found and leave as planned. This was no longer my problem, but concern for Amanda, and especially the grandchildren, stopped me. If the house was nearing foreclosure, where would they go? What was happening with the family finances, and did Amanda even know? I gathered the documents, taking them to the kitchen table to examine in better light. The story they told was alarming. Richard had accumulated gambling debts exceeding $40,000. Credit cards in both their names were maxed out. The mortgage was 3 months behind, with foreclosure proceedings beginning. Most disturbing was the letter from Richard's workplace, an accounting firm, suggesting he was under investigation for improper handling of client funds. My heart sank further. Not only was Richard forcing me out of their home, but he appeared to be destroying the family's financial security through gambling and possibly embezzlement. Did Amanda know any of this? From her conversation with Richard last night, it seemed unlikely. She had mentioned financial strain, but appeared to believe it was partly due to my presence. I sat at the table, documents spread before me. Facing an ethical dilemma, I could leave as planned, washing my hands of the situation as Richard had done to me. Or I could find some way to protect Amanda and the grandchildren from the disaster Richard was creating, even though she had failed to protect me. The memory of Eleanor's face came to me suddenly, clear as if she sat across the table. "Do what's right, not what's easy," she would have said. It had been her guiding principle through 50 years of nursing, through raising Amanda, through her final painful months. I checked the time. 5:30 in the morning. No one would be awake for at least another hour. I gathered the financial documents, folded them carefully, and placed them in my duffel bag alongside my belongings. Then I returned to my original plan, retrieving my jacket from the closet and heading toward the front door. Pausing in the entryway, I looked back at the home that had briefly been mine. Through the living room archway, I could see Tommy's soccer trophy on the mantel next to Lisa's ceramic turtle she'd made in art class. I'd never see what awards they might win next, what they might create in the future. The thought pierced through my anger and hurt, leaving raw grief in its wake. I placed my house key on the entryway table, alongside the 3 envelopes containing my letters. With one final glance around, I opened the front door silently and stepped out into the cool pre-dawn air. The neighborhood was still dark, silent, except for distant birdsong announcing the approaching day. As I walked away from the house, duffel bag heavy on my shoulder, joints protesting each step, I still had no clear destination. But in my pocket was the evidence of Richard's betrayal, not just of me, but of his entire family. And for the first time since overhearing those cruel words, I felt a sense of purpose replacing the shame and hurt. Amanda had made her choice last night. Now I would make mine. Not for revenge, but for protection of the family Richard seemed determined to destroy. What exactly that would mean, I wasn't yet sure. But Eleanor had always said I was a builder, not just of bridges and buildings, but of solutions. It was time to build one last thing, a safety net for the family that had discarded me. The early morning bus downtown was nearly empty. I sat near the back, duffel bag beside me, mind racing through possibilities. My first priority was finding somewhere to stay. My second was figuring out what to do with the damning financial information I'd discovered. At 7:30, I checked into the West Side Motel, a clean but basic establishment where I'd occasionally put up out-of-town subcontractors during my construction days. $60 a night would drain my limited funds quickly, but I needed time to think and plan. Once settled in the sparse room, I called Stanley Hargrove. We'd worked construction together for 20 years before he made a career change, joining the police department and eventually becoming a detective specializing in financial crimes. We still met monthly for coffee when Eleanor was alive, less frequently since her passing. "Knox?" He sounded surprised to hear from me so early. "Everything okay?" "Not really," I admitted. "I need your advice, Stan. Professionally. Can we meet?" 2 hours later, we sat in a quiet corner of a downtown diner. I'd brought the financial documents, now organized chronologically in a folder I'd purchased at the drugstore next to the motel. Stan reviewed them carefully, his expression growing increasingly grave. "This is serious stuff, Knox," he said finally. "The gambling debts alone are bad enough, but these discrepancies at his workplace, the way he's hidden the mortgage situation, there's criminal activity here." "You're sure?" I asked, though I'd already reached the same conclusion. Stan nodded, tapping the employer's letter. "This isn't just suspicion. They've clearly found evidence, but are giving him a chance to explain before pressing charges." He looked up at me. "Does your daughter know about any of this?" "I don't believe so," I said, explaining briefly about my living situation and what I'd overheard. Stan's face darkened with anger on my behalf, but he remained professional. "These documents suggest Richard has been stealing from his clients, and possibly from your daughter as well." The foreclosure notice indicates he hasn't been using household money to pay the mortgage. Where has that money gone? Gambling, I assume, I said. The receipts are from casinos in Atlantic City, online betting sites. Stan thought for a moment. I need to bring this to the Financial Crimes Unit, with your permission, of course. You're under no obligation, but this could protect your daughter and grandchildren in the long run. Richard is digging them into a hole they may never escape. I hesitated only briefly. Do what needs to be done. But can we keep my involvement minimal? Amanda's already chosen Richard over me. I don't want to appear vindictive. I'll handle it delicately, Stan promised. We'll focus on the workplace angle first, since that's clearly heading toward charges anyway, based on this letter. The personal financial issues will come to light during the investigation. We arranged to meet at the police station that afternoon. Meanwhile, I made another call to Thomas Parker, Amanda's godfather, and a successful attorney who had remained close to our family over the years. Eleanor had been college roommates with Thomas's late wife, and though he lived 2 hours away, he had always taken his role as Amanda's godfather seriously. I need a favor, Thomas, I explained after filling him in on the situation. When this all comes to light, Amanda and the kids will need somewhere to go. The house will likely be foreclosed on, and Richard may be facing charges. Bring them here, Thomas said without hesitation. I have plenty of room, and Amanda is like a daughter to me. But Knox, where are you staying? You shouldn't be in some motel. I'm fine for now, I assured him, unwilling to complicate things further. Just be ready for Amanda's call in the next few days. She'll need your support more than mine at that point. That afternoon, I gave my formal statement to the Financial Crimes Unit, providing the documents and explaining how I'd found them. Detective Mercer, the lead investigator, assured me they would move quickly. Based on the letter from his employer, it seems they've already gathered substantial evidence, she explained. With this additional information about his personal finances and gambling, we can build a stronger case and move more quickly. What about my daughter and grandchildren? I asked. We'll ensure they're treated as potential victims, not accomplices, Detective Mercer assured me, unless evidence suggests your daughter was knowingly involved, which seems unlikely from what you've described. I provided Thomas's contact information as a safe location for Amanda and the children. Then, feeling physically and emotionally drained, I returned to the motel to wait. The next morning, Stan called with an update. Richard's employer had been cooperating with police for weeks, documenting approximately $70,000 in client funds that had been misappropriated. With the additional evidence I'd provided showing the gambling connection, they had enough for an arrest warrant, which would be executed the following morning. Are you sure you don't want to warn your daughter? Stan asked gently. I'd considered this repeatedly, turning the question over in my sleepless mind all night. If I call, Richard might flee or destroy evidence, I finally said. And Amanda might not believe me. She needs to hear it from authorities. The reality was more painful. I feared her rejection, feared hearing her defend the man who had called me a filthy old burden while she stood by silently. My heart wasn't strong enough for that possibility. We'll have victim services contact her immediately after the arrest, Stan promised, and I'll personally make sure she knows about Thomas offering a place to stay. The next day, I watched from a coffee shop across the street as police cars pulled up to Amanda's house at 9:15 in the morning. From this distance I couldn't see details, only the officers approaching the door, then eventually leading Richard out in handcuffs to a waiting police car. My phone rang 30 minutes later, Amanda's name flashing on the screen. I let it go to voicemail, not yet ready to speak with her. She needed time to process the shock, and I needed time to process my hurt. Thomas called an hour later, confirming that Amanda had contacted him in panic. She's bringing the kids here tomorrow, he said. Knox, she's asking about you. Says you left without explanation, just letters. Did she mention what Richard said about me? I asked. A pause. No. But she's devastated, confused. The police told her everything. About the embezzlement, the gambling, the mortgage. Give her time, I said. She needs to focus on the children right now. I'll contact her when things settle. But as I hung up, I wondered if I was being cowardly, punishing Amanda for her loyalty to her husband, however misplaced. Eleanor wouldn't have approved of my distance. Family faces problems together, she would have said. Yet the wound was still too fresh, the memory of Amanda's silence too painful. I extended my stay at the motel another week, eating sparingly to conserve funds, wondering what my next steps should be. The senior housing waitlists remained years long. My small savings wouldn't last more than a month in even this modest accommodation. I considered reaching out to former colleagues about temporary work, though my arthritis limited what I could do. On the third day after Richard's arrest, Thomas called again. "She needs you, Knox. Whatever happened between you, she needs her father now." I closed my eyes, Eleanor's face appearing in my mind again. "Tell her I'll meet her tomorrow," I said finally. "At your office, not the house." It was time to face my daughter and the painful truth between us. Thomas's law office occupied the top floor of a modest professional building overlooking the town square. I arrived 15 minutes early, my stomach knotted with anxiety. Thomas greeted me warmly, embracing me with unexpected emotion. "You look terrible, old friend," he said candidly. "Are you taking care of yourself?" "Doing my best," I replied, though the dark circles under my eyes and my unwashed jacket told a different story. "Amanda's on her way," Thomas said, guiding me to his private office. "The kids are at my house with my housekeeper. I thought it best for you two to talk alone first." I nodded gratefully, sinking into a leather chair that was far more comfortable than the sagging motel mattress I'd slept on for the past 4 nights. Thomas offered coffee, which I accepted more for the warmth in my hands than the caffeine. At precisely 2 o'clock, Thomas's receptionist announced Amanda's arrival. My heart hammered against my ribs as the door opened. Amanda stood there, looking as exhausted as I felt, her eyes red-rimmed and swollen, hair hastily pulled back, wearing clothes that appeared slept in. For a long moment, we simply stared at each other. Then her face crumpled, and she rushed forward, collapsing to her knees beside my chair. "Dad," she sobbed, grasping my hand. "I'm so sorry, so incredibly sorry." I sat frozen, the speech I'd mentally prepared evaporating. Thomas discreetly left the room, closing the door softly behind him. I looked down at my daughter, this woman I'd raised, who I'd loved unconditionally through every stage of her life. My anger and hurt remained, but seeing her broken like this awakened the protective instinct that had guided me since she was placed in my arms as an infant. "Why didn't you tell me what was happening?" she asked, looking up through tears. "Why did you just leave?" The question snapped me back to reality. "I heard you and Richard talking that night," I said, my voice steadier than I expected. "I heard him call me a filthy old man he wanted out of his house. I heard him give you an ultimatum, and I heard you agree to talk to me about leaving." Amanda's face registered shock, then deep shame. "You heard that?" "Every word." She slumped further. "I never agreed with him, Dad. I was just trying to buy time, to figure something out. I would never have asked you to leave." "But you didn't defend me either," I pointed out. "The hurt still raw. You didn't tell him he was wrong, that I had a right to be there, that I was family." Fresh tears spilled down her cheeks. "I know. I failed you. I was caught between my husband and my father, and I handled it terribly. I've been weak and cowardly, and now everything is falling apart." Her frank admission deflated some of my righteous anger. "Tell me about Richard," I said more gently. "Did you know about any of it? The gambling, the embezzlement, the mortgage?" She shook her head vehemently. "Nothing. He handled all the finances. Said it was easiest that way since he was an accountant." I trusted him completely. Her voice broke. How could I not have seen it? 3 months behind on the mortgage. Credit cards maxed out. Client money stolen. "Manipulators are skilled at hiding the truth," I said, thinking of Amanda's biological mother who had hidden her affair for months before abandoning us. "And people who love them often don't want to see the red flags." Amanda wiped her eyes with her sleeve. "The police explained everything. They think it started about 2 years ago with small amounts. The gambling. Then bigger losses, taking client money to cover them, taking more to try winning it back. Classic addiction spiral." I nodded. "Stanley had explained the same pattern to me. The house will be gone within weeks," she continued. "Most of our savings is gone. Richard's facing multiple felony charges. The firm is pressing charges too, trying to recover client funds." She looked up at me, devastation in her eyes. "What am I going to tell Tommy and Lisa? Their father might go to prison. We've lost our home. Everything is destroyed." I squeezed her hand, maternal instinct finally overcoming hurt. "You'll tell them the truth, in age-appropriate ways. That their father made serious mistakes, that families sometimes face hard times, that you'll protect them no matter what." Amanda nodded, then hesitated. Dad, the police said you were the one who found the financial documents. That you brought them forward. Yes, I admitted. I found them accidentally when getting my jacket to leave. I couldn't just walk away knowing you and the kids were in danger, even though I trailed off, unwilling to twist the knife further. Even though I betrayed you, she finished for me. You still protected us. I shrugged uncomfortably. You're my daughter. Tommy and Lisa are my grandchildren. Amanda straightened up, wiping her face and taking a deep breath. Richard is claiming you planted the evidence. Says you were jealous of him, wanted to destroy our family. My temper flared for the first time. That's ridiculous. The police have documentation from his workplace. The gambling receipts have his signature. The bank statements show his card was used. I know, Amanda said quickly. I don't believe him. Not anymore. But he's desperate, and he's trying anything to save himself. She swallowed hard. He even suggested to his lawyer that I file elder abuse charges against you, claiming you were unstable, that you threatened him. I laughed bitterly. Elder abuse? When he's the one who called me a filthy old man he wanted thrown out? He says I'll regret not supporting him, she whispered, fear evident in her voice, that he'll make sure I have nothing left if I don't stand by him. I leaned forward, meeting her eyes directly. Amanda, listen to me. You have choices now. Difficult ones, but choices nonetheless. You can believe Richard's lies and support a man who has systematically deceived you, gambled away your family's security, and committed crimes that will likely send him to prison. Or you can stand in your truth, cooperate with the authorities, and focus on rebuilding a life for yourself and your children. She bit her lip, vulnerability and uncertainty radiating from her. I'm scared, Dad. I know you are, sweetheart. But remember what Eleanor always told you? Courage isn't the absence of fear. It's doing what's right despite being afraid. Amanda nodded slowly, tears welling again at the mention of her stepmother. The kids miss you. They keep asking where Grandpa went. Lisa cried when I read them your letter. The mention of my grandchildren pierced my heart. I miss them too. More than I can say. Will you come see them? They're at Thomas's house now. We'll be staying there until I figure out next steps. I hesitated, thinking of the motel room where my dwindling funds afforded me perhaps another week's stay. I will. But Amanda, I need to know something first. If none of this had come to light, if Richard hadn't been arrested, would you have asked me to leave as he demanded? She looked away, shame coloring her features. I don't know, she admitted softly. I want to say no, that I would have stood up to him. But I've been letting him make more and more decisions, going along to keep the peace. I've been a coward. Her honesty hurt, but also felt like the foundation upon which something new might be built. Not the unquestioning trust of before, but perhaps something more mature, more equal. Thank you for telling me the truth, I said. It's where we need to start. She nodded, then asked hesitantly, Where are you staying, Dad? Your letter said not to worry, but I considered lying, preserving my pride, but decided truth would be our new currency, the West Side Motel. It's temporary while I figure things out. Amanda looked stricken. A motel? Dad, no. Come stay with us at Thomas's, please. I'll think about it, I promised, though the thought of depending on charity again, even from family, made my stomach clench. Right now, let's focus on you and the kids. What are your next steps with Richard? The question seemed to center her. I'm filing for divorce, she said with surprising firmness. Thomas is helping me. I've already given a statement to the police confirming I had no knowledge of the financial crimes. Richard's preliminary hearing is next week. She straightened her shoulders slightly. I'm done being manipulated and lied to. Pride swelled in my chest, glimpsing the strong woman I'd raised emerging from the fog of Richard's influence. That's my girl. We talked for another hour, making plans, discussing practical matters like retrieving their belongings from the house before foreclosure, transferring utilities, notifying the children's school. As we prepared to leave for Thomas's house to see Tommy and Lisa, Amanda stopped me with a hand on my arm. Dad, can you ever forgive me? For not standing up for you that night? For letting Richard treat you that way? I looked at my daughter, seeing both the child I'd raised and the woman who had faltered but was finding her strength again. I'm working on it, I said honestly. Give me time. She nodded, accepting this partial absolution as the best I could offer for now. Together we walked out to face whatever came next, broken but not destroyed, wounded but beginning to heal. 1 year later, I sat on my small apartment balcony, watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of orange and pink. My third-floor walk-up wasn't fancy, but it was affordable on my Social Security and the part-time consulting work I'd found with a former colleague's construction company. More importantly, it was only 3 blocks from Amanda's new place. After the divorce was finalized and the dust settled, Amanda had found a modest 3-bedroom apartment in a good school district. She'd returned to teaching, the career she'd put on hold when Tommy was born at Richard's insistence. Her salary wasn't large, but combined with child support, when Richard actually paid it, they managed. The children had adjusted better than expected, resilient in the way only the young can be. Richard had ultimately accepted a plea deal, admitting to embezzlement and fraud in exchange for a reduced sentence of 4 years. His attorney had wisely advised him to drop the ridiculous allegations against me when bank records clearly showed the timeline of his crimes predated my moving in with them by years. I visited Amanda and the kids for dinner at least twice weekly. Today was Thursday, our regular family dinner night. I carefully wrapped the apple pie I'd baked that morning, Eleanor's recipe that Lisa had begged me to teach her. At 67, my hands weren't as steady for crimping pie crusts as they once were, but cooking gave me purpose, connection to Eleanor's memory, and something to share. The short walk to Amanda's building barely bothered my arthritis these days. The medication I'd once deemed too expensive was now covered by a senior prescription assistance program the social worker had helped me find. Regular movement kept my joints from stiffening, according to my doctor, who seemed pleased with my overall health at my last checkup. "Grandpa!" Tommy shouted as I entered their apartment, rushing to take the pie from my hands. At 11, he'd grown inches in the past year, gangly and energetic. Lisa appeared seconds later, wrapping her arms around my waist. "Did you bring the recipe cards? You promised to show me the secret to Grandma's dinner rolls." Right here, I patted my shirt pocket where I'd tucked Eleanor's handwritten recipe cards, preserved in plastic sleeves. "After dinner, we'll go through it step by step." Amanda emerged from the kitchen, wiping her hands on a dish towel, looking more relaxed than she had in months. Teaching suited her, bringing color to her cheeks and confidence to her bearing. "Perfect timing, Dad. Lasagna's just coming out of the oven." These ordinary moments of family life had become precious to me, more valuable than any possession. After dinner, while Amanda helped Tommy with a science project, Lisa and I sat at the kitchen table with the recipe cards spread before us. "Grandma's handwriting was so pretty," Lisa observed, tracing Eleanor's elegant script with her small finger. "She was proud of it," I confirmed. "Took calligraphy classes at the community center before you were born." "Do you still miss her a lot?" Lisa asked with a child's directness. "Every day," I answered honestly. "But it's different now. Less like an open wound, more like a cherished memory." Lisa considered this. "That's how I feel about our old house sometimes. And even about Dad, a little bit." She glanced toward the living room, lowering her voice. "Is that okay? To miss someone even if they did bad things?" I put my arm around her thin shoulders. "Absolutely okay. Feelings are complicated, kiddo. You can miss the good parts of your dad and still understand why he can't be with you right now." She nodded, seemingly satisfied, then returned her attention to the recipe. "So we need to let the dough rise twice?" These conversations happened regularly, brief moments where the children processed their changing family circumstances with remarkable resilience and wisdom. Tommy asked more practical questions about when his father would be released, whether they would live with him again. Amanda had been honest with both children, explaining in age-appropriate terms what Richard had done wrong, the consequences of his actions, and how their family would continue differently but securely. Later that evening, as I prepared to leave, Amanda handed me an envelope. "This came for you, at my address. It's from Richard." I stared at the envelope, postmarked from the minimum security prison where Richard was serving his sentence. "Have you read it?" She shook her head. "It's addressed to you. The children get letters from him monthly, and occasionally he writes to me about practical matters, but this is the first time he's written to you." I tucked the envelope into my jacket pocket. "I'll look at it later." But the letter burned in my pocket during the walk home. In my apartment, I made a cup of tea, Eleanor's favorite chamomile blend, before finally opening it. "Knox," it began simply, no dear or other formality. "I've had a lot of time to think in here. Addiction counseling is mandatory, and through that process, I've been forced to confront the harm I've caused. Not just the financial crimes that landed me here, but the way I treated you. What I said that night was inexcusable. You deserved respect as Amanda's father, as my children's grandfather, and simply as a human being. My behavior reflected my own insecurities and failures, not any shortcoming of yours. I don't expect forgiveness. I'm writing because acknowledging wrongdoing is part of my recovery process, and because you deserve at least this much honesty after my attempts to blame you for my crimes. Amanda tells me you've been a steadfast support to her and the children. Thank you for being what I failed to be, a man of integrity. Richard. I read the letter twice, surprised by the apparent sincerity. The gambling addiction counseling was likely court-mandated, the letter possibly an assignment from his therapist. Yet something in the straightforward acknowledgement seemed genuine. The following week, after considerable thought and a long conversation with my own counselor, another service the senior center had connected me with, I wrote back. My response was brief, acknowledging his letter without offering easy absolution. I expressed hope for his continued recovery, for the sake of Tommy and Lisa, if nothing else. It wasn't forgiveness exactly, but perhaps a first step towards something like peace. Over the next several months, we exchanged occasional letters. Richard shared insights from his recovery program, updates on his prison GED tutoring work, questions about the children that Amanda might not answer. I sent printed photos of Tommy's soccer tournaments and Lisa's art show, shared anecdotes about their accomplishments, careful always to respect Amanda's boundaries around her ex-husband's involvement in their lives. When Richard was granted his first supervised visit with the children, Amanda asked if I would accompany them. I'm not ready to face him alone, she admitted, and the kids would feel more secure with you there. The visit was awkward but civil. Richard looked older, thinner, the arrogance gone from his bearing. He spoke softly to the children, answering their questions honestly, making no grand promises about the future. When he thanked me directly for supporting the family in his absence, I nodded acknowledgement but offered no more. Afterward, as we drove home, Tommy asked, "Is Dad a bad person, Grandpa?" I considered my answer carefully. Your dad made very bad choices that hurt people, but people aren't just their worst actions or their biggest mistakes. He's trying to learn and do better now. Tommy nodded thoughtfully, like when I cheated on that math test last year and had to write an apology to Mrs. Brennan and the class. Similar concept, much bigger scale, I agreed, impressed by his attempt to understand. These were the conversations that mattered most in the end, I realized. Not the dramatic confrontations or grand gestures, but the quiet moments of truth-sharing, of helping these children navigate a complex world with integrity and compassion. My monthly senior support group at the community center had grown from 3 participants to 15. We shared experiences of family tensions, health challenges, financial worries, but also moments of joy, wisdom gained, unexpected new beginnings. I found myself looking forward to these meetings, to the camaraderie of others who understood the unique challenges of our life stage. As I reflected on the journey of the past year, I recognized how much both Amanda and I had grown through our painful experience. She had found strength she didn't know she possessed, rebuilding her life with determination and grace. I had discovered that my worth wasn't determined by others' treatment of me, that vulnerability wasn't weakness, and that family could be broken and mended in unexpected ways. Standing on my small balcony one evening, watching the neighborhood children play in the park across the street, I felt Eleanor's presence beside me, as I often did in quiet moments. "We did all right," I whispered to her memory. Not perfect, but all right. The betrayal I'd experienced had led to truth. The pain had led to healing. The ending of one chapter had enabled the beginning of another, different but not without its own beauty and purpose. In helping Amanda and my grandchildren navigate their broken path, I had found my own way forward as well. What defines family, in the end, isn't obligation or blood ties alone, but the daily choices we make to support one another, to forgive imperfections, to rebuild after devastation. Richard's cruel words that night had shattered my world, but from those fragments, something more authentic had emerged, something built on truth rather than pretense or obligation. If you've stayed with me through this story, I wonder if you've experienced similar moments of family betrayal or difficult truths. Sometimes the most painful experiences teach us the most valuable lessons. Share your thoughts in the comments below, and consider subscribing if you'd like to hear more stories about family, redemption, and finding strength in unexpected places. Life rarely gives us neat, happy endings, but it always offers the chance to write the next chapter with greater wisdom and authenticity. Thank you for listening, and remember, it's never too late to build something new from the ruins of what was lost.